May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our collective hearts be pleasing and acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So a couple of days ago, my puppy Dolly started acting weird. She retreated to the laundry room and she growled whenever the other two dogs came near. I let her be, thinking maybe she wasn't feeling very well. But I had to intervene when her sister Mia went back there and started barking her head off. "Out!" I shouted, pointing a menacing finger at the loud one. Mia stood her ground and little Dolly lunged at her with bared teeth. Then I noticed the reason for the ruckus. There was a new unopened bag of dog food just sitting on the floor, and Dolly was guarding it, keeping everyone away, even her sister, especially her sister. Poor Mia had recognized the injustice of it and spoken up, even though she knows she is not supposed to bark like that. She knew she could be scolded, but she had to tell me that Dolly was doing the wrong thing. Mia's big on the rules, especially as they apply to other dogs. She gets scolded quite often for being too loud, but when she sees what she perceives as injustice, she will not keep silent. Now, this little doggy drama happened to be unfolding as I was reading the 62nd chapter of the book of the prophet Isaiah, which starts out like this: "For Zion's sake I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest, until her vindication shines out like the dawn and her salvation like a burning torch." Wow, so great was Isaiah's love for his people and his commitment to their vindication and salvation from injustice that he would just not keep silent. No matter what the risk, he would continue speaking out, even though prophets are generally killed for that sort of thing. Isaiah speaks boldly, saying, "I will not keep silent." Now, I don't know how Isaiah felt about dogs, but I think he could have appreciated our Mia, who has the heart of a prophet. In the face of blatant injustice, the hoarding of food, she articulated her concern, even knowing that she might be scolded by me or pounced on by her bratty sister, and both of those things did happen. But had she said nothing, Dolly would have stayed there all day long, maybe even longer, until finally I poured the food into the bin and took the huge bag of temptation away. In the meantime, no one was allowed in, not even for a drink of water, and that is not how we run things in our household. Knowing this, Mia simply could not keep silent. That's the job of a prophet, to speak up for how things are run in God's household and to speak out when things are not being done that way. Now, Isaiah was a prophet who was so outspoken that an entire, rather thick biblical book is named after him, but we can hear the voices of other prophets in the context of biblical stories as well. Today's lesson comes to us from the Gospel of John, and I would invite you to listen closely for the voice of a prophet speaking up so that God's will might be revealed, even though it was risky to do so. This is from the 2nd chapter of John, a couple of days after Jesus has called his first disciples to follow him. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water, it had become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Did you hear the prophet? John doesn't name her, but we know her name from Luke's gospel. She's called Mary, Jesus' mother. And while her role in the story is a bit overshadowed by the miracle of the wine, that only happened because Mary would not keep silent, even when her son tried to shush her up. I don't know why she would not keep silent. Maybe she was feeling the flush of too much wine, or a hopeful optimism inspired by seeing everyone together, eating and drinking and laughing. Maybe the wine and the merriment had helped her forget for just 1 minute that once the gift of her son was offered to the world, it would all be taken from her. Or maybe she spoke up, fully aware and resolute. She had kept him long enough, and these people, her people, hungered and thirsted literally for God's love and abundance to be made known to them. Here was such poverty that even at a wedding feast, they could not manage to keep the wine flowing. While at finer tables, the wealthy became fat and drunk on the abundance harvested by her people, whose cups and plates were empty. Did she whisper a prayer before she spoke out? Perhaps she recited the words of Psalm 36, verses 7 through 10. How precious is your steadfast love, O God. All people may take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the abundance of your house, and you give them drink from the river of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light. O continue your steadfast love to those who know you, and your salvation to the upright of heart. Amen. I imagine Mary praying, summoning the courage of God's steadfast love before speaking the words that would send her son head first into the destiny that would pierce his beautiful body and her upright heart. No matter what it cost her, she would not be silent. Much attention is given to the sacrifice Jesus made, and rightly so. But what of Mary? She too made a sacrifice. From this moment on, she will not appear again, not in this gospel, until the crucifixion, where her cup will be filled to overflowing with her tears. What if she had said nothing that night in Cana? It must have been tempting, but somehow she kept her resolve. I will not keep silent. In bold defiance of all who lived by the mantra of scarcity, Mary's voice prepared the way for a new guiding word, abundance, while the other guests were looking into their empty wine glasses. Mary was pointing to Jesus, saying, do whatever he tells you, for he would show them the way to abundance, pouring out the finest blessings into their waiting cups, filling them to overflowing with a ridiculous quantity of wine, just gallons of the stuff, way more than they could possibly need, and better quality than they dreamed of. Because once you let God do something wonderful for you, God just doesn't know how to stop. And it isn't just wine, is it? Time and time again, Jesus would show people how to experience the abundance of God, gathering the hungry and asking who among them had any food. Somehow all were fed with leftovers. Or having the fishing crew try things an unconventional way, they would net more fish than they could haul in without tearing the nets. Blessing upon blessing, for ours is a God who delights when all of us share in the abundance. There will be enough because that is God's way, and if we follow Mary's advice and do whatever Jesus tells us to do, all people will know it. I give thanks to Mary and other prophetic voices that to this day challenge our human fear of scarcity and proclaim instead the delight of abundance. And let us be clear here, delighting in abundance in God's terms does not mean that some people get to enjoy having too much, but that all people should partake in what God has provided for our collective sustenance. Like the psalm we just heard, where all people may take refuge in the shadow of God's wings, feasting on the abundance of God's house. But this is a countercultural notion in direct opposition with the systems of the world which promote excess abundance for very few and scarcity for too many. To proclaim a different way means to challenge the very systems that we have been taught to revere. It is risky to speak out against what just is it not? Prophets have been killed for this very thing, for daring to suggest that there is a better way in which all should partake in the abundance that our God meant for us to share. How tightly we cling when we believe that there can never be enough for all, and that thinking extends beyond our nutritive and material assets to include more esoteric concerns like rights. There are those who seem to believe that more rights for some mean fewer rights for others. This thinking has led to strong, even violent pushback against those who advocate for the rights, meaning equitable treatment, of women, of people of color, of the disabled, of the socioeconomically disadvantaged, of indigenous persons, of the LGBTQIA+ community, of guest workers and climate refugees, of all who have asked simply for access to the same blessings and benefits enjoyed by others in the human family, as if rights were slices of pie and only so many to go around. Scarcity-minded reactionaries would attempt to silence or talk over those who speak out, perhaps afraid that if we acknowledge inequality, they will somehow come up wanting. I know of a church who in the summer of 2020 put up a Black Lives Matter sign and it was stolen. They put up another, it was vandalized. Do the perpetrators not realize that we cannot claim that all lives matter or even that any lives matter until systemic racism has truly been eradicated? It is not enough for us to smile fondly at the idea of one man's dream that one day Black children and white children might hold hands and play together, when 6 decades later, some white children are playing a game on Snapchat called Slave Trader, in which they pretend to buy and sell their Black schoolmates to each other as slaves. Child's play, some districts are calling it, while those who speak out are criticized for making those dear children feel uncomfortable. So far, 8 states have passed legislation which makes it illegal for schools to even talk about racism or racial bias. Meanwhile, some parents raid school libraries to remove books that they feel might upset their clearly non-racist children. To hear more about this, I commend to you the NPR podcast called This American Life, the January 9th episode. It's called Talking While Black. Turns out that our conversations are not over, that there are things that need to be talked about, even if they make some of us feel uncomfortable. I imagine that Jesus felt uncomfortable from time to time, which is why he insistently brought up uncomfortable topics in his teachings. I don't know about you, but I am never comfortable for very long when I read the Gospels. Those lessons pack a punch. Good news they proclaim, but it's the kind of good news that doesn't tiptoe around trying to make me feel good. Jesus knew that, and yet he risked everything to tell it. He would not keep silent. I thank God for those who refuse to keep silent, who continue paving the way of abundant life for all by speaking out. Today, we celebrate those brave souls who, like Jesus and like his mother, have decided that they cannot and will not keep silent, who have risked great pain and loss in order to advocate for a more godly way of thinking, that there is enough, far more than enough, and it is God's great delight that we share it. I would like to think that we still listen to those voices, and that we will become increasingly curious about hearing new voices, even the loud ones that disrupt our routines a bit. The voices of poets and philosophers, scientists, historians, and children not quite grown, and even the earth itself, who is also trying to get our attention any way she can. What would we learn if we listen to the voices that will not keep silent? In the spirit of listening, I offer you this song as a prayer and a blessing. Father, we have heard you calling to your church in every age, for a sign of true devotion, for a sacrifice of praise, in this place where